Hello and welcome. My name is Rev Bowen from Simply Waldorf. I hope you'll enjoy this video in which we will cover some basic principles and simple concepts you can apply in your homeschool program or in a classroom setting. At the end of this video, we will share some free offers from Simply Waldorf. So let's get started. If you're new to Waldorf education or just not quite familiar enough with the typical rhythms or designs of a day, then I can try to clarify some of that for you. You might hear references made to something called the main lesson. The main lesson is that time of the day, usually in the morning, where a subject matter is brought over the course of an hour and a half to 2 hours, and there's usually a theme for that main lesson block. So there are two aspects here. The main lesson is the 1.5 to 2 hour lesson part of the morning. A lesson block is a matter of 3 or 4 weeks where during each day's main lesson, there is the same subject matter being presented. So you may have a 4-week lesson block of language arts. And that means every morning in main lesson, you would be working on language arts over the course of 3, 4, 5 weeks. Now, the main lesson itself doesn't mean that we're doing language arts work at our desks for an hour and a half or 2 hours. Far from it. Especially the younger they are, the less you want to keep them confined to a desk. It's not productive. You want to optimize their time. And there are some really beautiful ways to work with the whole human being that helps a child find a nice rhythm in their morning in the main lesson that serves them so that when they do sit down to work, it's productive, however long, ideally, that turns out to be. So the main lesson each morning is organized in parts. The first thing we do is to work with rhythmic activities. So this could be speech work, it could be a balance beam work, it could be work with bean bags, it can be singing, it could be playing the recorder, reciting verses, poetry, etc., etc. These are things that build on the rhythmic memory and movement, feeling our way into rhythm and movement with the child so that they find a real harmony. They harmonize their movement with their feeling life. There's not a lot of thinking. I mean, in terms of, we think memorization is sort of thinking, but it really isn't. Memorization is much more a part of our rhythmic forces, where we find those in our bodily organization here in our organs. And I know that sounds weird because we think memorize with our brains, but just suspend your disbelief for a moment and just live with the idea that if we work with rhythms, if we, rhythm replaces strength. If we work with rhythms every day, a child will very naturally pick up good habits, whether that's doing chores or learning a very long poem. They can typically do these things when we bring it to them rhythmically, much faster than we can as adults. So that's an interesting aspect of memorization. So the first part, maybe, with first graders, for example, that's maybe half an hour of movement and speech, maybe 20 minutes, depends on the child or if it's a bigger group and all those kinds of things. Then we transition, in some form, we have to have an actual transition that brings them into a review of what came the day before. Either that's a review of the story content, bringing it back and re-enlivening those imaginations, or it's also bringing some of the actual lesson content back into their awareness. This is a really key aspect of what we do in Waldorf education, because we let things, we consciously want the children to let these things go to sleep in them. And overnight, something magical happens when you wake that back up the next day or next days. It transforms. It becomes more potent, more vital. They own it more, especially if we bring these things back rhythmically. Then after some review, we put what we've re-enlivened to work. And that's the work aspect. So usually this is typically sitting at the desk doing some work of some kind. And in the older grades, that's going to be a longer amount of time that they can work. And in the younger grades, it's not quite so much. We try to find that optimal amount of time where they're pushing a little bit against their resistance. They're learning to focus. They're learning to sit still. And yet there's a point of diminishing returns where we're pushing too far. So we got to find that balance, always. And then the last thing that we transition into is the story. And this is that imaginative content that we bring to them. In first grade, that's fairy tales from around the world. We bring them this imaginative content that they willfully build in their mind's eye, in their imagination. They build these images, and then we just let that go. That's the end of main lesson. They take those stories with them into the night, and whatever happens there, it transforms and becomes more powerful when they come back the next day, and we re-enliven, we reawaken and remember those images that they built the day before. So sort of a 4 parts of main lesson: the rhythmic movement and activities, the review, the work, and the story. And so you're going to do that every day, hopefully, and then you have a main lesson block, which lasts for a number of weeks, where the content, if it's doing math, that math lasts for a number of weeks, and language arts or history or whatever the subject may be. Thank you for watching the video. I hope it was helpful. Please subscribe to our channel by clicking on the logo here and giving us a thumbs up below. We'd love it if you would share our video with other Waldorf Homeschool families and/or classroom teachers. You can find the free offer in the description below, as well as links to other valuable resources.